You arrive in silence, but nothing begins. There is no ceremony, no welcome mat. Just the hush of something ancient, like the inside of a forgotten cathedral, built not of stone, but of thought. The air around you is thick, not with dust, but with waiting. Waiting for something that already happened. Waiting for you, perhaps. Though you cannot say why. You stand before a doorway that does not exist. There is no frame, no handle, no hinges, only a suggestion. And still you are through it. You haven't crossed a threshold. You haven't even moved. But somehow you're already inside. Let me greet you gently, not as a narrator, but as a presence. The kind of presence that shows up in dreams you forget upon waking, yet miss in the late afternoon. You are here now at the edge of something that can't be named. A place between memory and invention. And perhaps even before the story begins, we must ask, were you ever not here? Tonight we will wander through a dream stitched from paradoxes. A soft labyrinth of ideas so quiet they feel like echoes of unborn thoughts. You won't need to follow. Just drift. And while you drift, let your shoulders go. Let your fingers uncurl. Let your thoughts loosen their laces. There is nothing to reach for, nothing to do. Now breathe with me, not deeply, not sharply, just enough to feel your ribs move like reeds in still water. In through the nose, pause. Out through the mouth, even slower this time. Imagine each breath peeling a layer of the world away, until all that's left is the silence you came from. And if you find yourself floating in thought and sleep in something in between, that's not a mistake. That's the point. If this kind of storytelling feels like a quiet lantern glowing inside your chest, you're welcome to stay. Subscribe if you'd like silently or with a smile. And if any part of this touches the part of you that dreams while awake, leave a comment like a small stone on a path you hope someone else will find. Because now, the room is here. It wasn't before, but your presence conjured it. Some philosophers argue that time and space are illusions of the observer, that existence itself unfolds only where attention touches. But others, the dreamers, say this. The door isn't real. The entry never mattered. You were always here. And in this impossible architecture, in this hush between moments, you remember something you never knew. The story begins now. Not with a bang, not with a word, but with a presence that defies arrival. You move through a space that doesn't move with you. The floor beneath your feet gives slightly like memory softened by time. You are walking, but it feels more like remembering. Each step hums, not with sound, but with suggestion. There is a figure ahead, still, waiting. Not in ambush, but in patience, like someone who's been early for years. You hesitate. Not out of fear, but a deep, quiet recognition that you are about to be seen not as you are, but as you once were, or might have been. The stranger lifts their head. Their face is neither old nor young. Their eyes are quiet like windows into a room you used to live in. And then they say your name. Not the name others call you, not the name on your birth certificate or your inbox, but the real one. The name that doesn't need syllables. The one you sometimes hear just as you're falling asleep, spoken by no mouth, felt like wind against your ribs. They smile when they say it. A small, sad smile. Like someone seeing a ghost or coming home. You're early, they whisper. Again, the air around you shifts. Nothing has changed, and yet the world feels adjusted, as if your presence has corrected some ancient trajectory. You don't answer. Not with words, because you can't, because you don't know who they are, but more truthfully because you do. There's a concept in some dream work traditions from the Iroquois and certain Sufi interpretations that dreams are not what we see, but what sees us. That when a figure appears in a dream and knows your name, you are not dreaming them. They are dreaming you. And maybe this is what's happening now. They offer you a seat though no chair exists. You sit anyway and the air yields. Between you, stillness. No introductions. Only a shared memory that refuses to explain itself. Last time they say gently you arrived with music in your breath. This time, it's more like gravity. You try to respond, but no words come. Only a sense like a taste you can't place that this conversation is older than you. Cryptomnesia. Say the psychologists. A memory misfiled resurfacing as new. But that explanation feels too neat, too binary. This is messier, more sacred. In Maori cosmology, ancestors don't follow behind you, they walk ahead, clearing your path. And those you meet in dreams are often not people at all, but fragments of your own past lives wearing faces shaped by longing. Maybe that's who this is. Maybe this stranger is the echo of your future self, or the architect of your birth, or a friend you haven't met in this version of the world. Some philosophers still debate whether identity is continuous, whether you are the same from one moment to the next, or simply a story the brain insists on telling. But this person, this gentle anomaly, they aren't confused. They don't flinch. They see you, and not as something becoming, but as something returned. You'll forget me again, they say, and you nod, because you already are. They hand you something, a cup or a thought, or maybe nothing at all, and then the room shifts again. You blink. They're gone, but something remains. Not a word, not a face, but a knowing, a whisper in the back of your being that you've been witnessed. Not just now, but always, and that you are not new. Only returning. There's a sorrow in the air that doesn't belong to you, and yet it wraps around your bones like an old blanket. The path beneath your feet is not solid ground, but memory disguised as hallway. Each step lands softly as if the world is afraid to wake something sleeping beneath it. You haven't said anything. You haven't cried. And yet everything here feels like it's grieving you. A lantern flickers ahead, swaying in a breeze that doesn't exist. It's not lighting the way. It's mourning something. A presence. Or perhaps an absence. Yours. But how can a place miss you before you've ever arrived? The ancient philosopher Anaximander believed the cosmos corrects imbalance by weaving opposites together, presence into absence, life into silence. But this feels less like correction and more like yearning. The corridor narrows as you walk, not because the space is closing, but because the world itself is remembering a shape it once expected to fill and failed to. There's a cradle in the corner, small, wooden, empty. Its curves are smooth from years of waiting, no dust, no decay, as if someone still believes you'll return. You kneel beside it, your fingers tracing its edges. It feels warm not from sunlight but from intention, like love poured into form unfinished. Nearby, a rocking chair leans slightly forward as though someone just stood up. The air beside it is thick with presence or the shadow of it, and above it on the wall hangs a drawing. You step closer. The face is familiar, yours, but not quite. The lines are younger, the eyes wider. A version of you that never made it here, or perhaps made it and never left. Some Amazonian dream cultures speak of the unborn as echoes with weight, not potential beings, but full spirits temporarily misplaced. They say the forest sings for them, that rivers remember their names, that a mother can weep for a child she never bore, and still be right. Is that what this is? A room shaped by longing, not experience. An emptiness formed by memory, not absence. In physics, there's a concept called retrocausality, the idea that an effect can precede its cause, that perhaps somewhere in the folds of space-time, the moment you were missed happened before you were conceived. And what if your first breath was not a beginning, but a reply? A soft, "I'm here" whispered, in response to a question the universe had been asking for centuries. It's strange to think of yourself as missed, but it's stranger still to feel it. Because now the walls of the hallway curve inward, not to trap you, but to hold you, and in their hush you hear it. Not sound, but sentiment. 1,000 gentle sighs pressed into stone and shadow. They do not accuse you of being late. They do not mourn you like a funeral. They simply ache like someone who rehearsed the moment of reunion for so long. They forgot you were never really gone. Some psychologists call this a trick of nostalgia, the brain's desperate attempt to find pattern where none exists. But some poets and more than a few old monks will tell you this. The ache you feel before you know why is the soul remembering the space it once left behind. You step back from the cradle, not empty-handed, but full of something you cannot name. A presence shaped like a gap, a longing shaped like a mirror. The hallway dims as you leave it behind, but you don't look back, because something in you already knows. It's still waiting, and it always will be. You find a room that doesn't open, it remembers. No door, no creak, no threshold. Just a subtle shift in the air, like the world blinking, and suddenly you are elsewhere. Inside silence, but not empty. This is the kind of silence that listens, the kind that has weight. The walls are lined with shelves, but not quite bookshelves, more like ribs in the architecture of remembering, lined with objects, shapes without names, colors that shift depending on how you feel. Each one seems vaguely familiar, like something from a dream you forgot on purpose. There's a table, a mirror, a chair that rocks ever so slightly, even though no one sits in it. And on that table, a journal. Its pages flutter as if caught in a breeze. But there is no wind. You reach for it. Not out of curiosity, but instinct. The way a musician might reach for a melody still half asleep in their fingers. You open the cover. Blank. Flip a page. Blank. And yet, you feel yourself remembering. Not a scene, not a detail, but a feeling. That you've sat here before. Written words you don't recall. That the ink dried long ago, even if your mind never formed the thought. Psychologists call this déjà vécu, not just familiarity, but the overwhelming conviction that you've lived this exact moment before, sometimes attributed to seizures or memory glitches, sometimes dismissed altogether. But certain mystics, especially in the Kabbalistic and early Sufi traditions, see it differently. They believe that memory exists outside the body, that it flows like light through a prism, and what we remember is merely what the soul is ready to reabsorb. In that view, what you're feeling now isn't false memory. It's memory too ancient for language. You close the journal and notice for the first time a painting hanging on the wall. It's simple. Just a room, this room perhaps. But with one difference. A child stands at the center. Their face is turned away, but you know somehow without question that it's you, or a version of you from before the idea of you was constructed. There's a paradox in Eastern philosophy present in Advaita Vedanta and echoed in Zen, that we do not experience the world as ourselves. We experience the self as the world remembering itself, which means this room may not be a location. It may be a fragment of consciousness, a return, not a discovery. You sit. The chair creaks like a sigh, And for a moment, you let yourself stop trying to understand. Because some memories aren't meant to be named. Some are so old, so intimate, they cannot survive the weight of language. They are the breath behind a candle that hasn't been lit in years. The rhythm in your heart when a certain song plays, even if you've never heard it. The pause before you speak a thought, only to find it already spoken. Some historians still debate whether memory exists independently of narrative, whether a moment with no timeline, no story can still be real. But poets, they know better. They'll tell you the most powerful memories are the ones that never arrive fully. They live as shadows, hints, wait without form. And this room? This strange listening room is made of exactly that. Not information, but essence. You rise without realizing you've stood. The journal remains unopened, and yet you feel like you've just finished reading it. And maybe you have. In another lifetime. In a version of you that doesn't need pages. The door doesn't close behind you. There was never one to begin with. Only the whisper of something remembering you. Long before you were born, the corridor begins to melt into something softer. Not a room, not a dream, but a kind of memory shaped like silence. Everything here feels like it's exhaling, as though the space itself has been holding its breath. For you. You walk slowly now. Not from caution, but reverence. The air around you thickens like the edge of sleep, or the moment just before rain. A presence wraps itself around you, not watching, not guiding, just receiving. There is no birth here, only re-entry. You come upon a space that doesn't announce itself. There are no banners, no thresholds, only a circle of light on the floor like the echo of a forgotten ritual. And when you step into it, something in your bones sighs. Not your lungs, not your mind. Deeper, as if some part of you has finally found its way back. There is a belief in certain Tibetan texts, especially the Bardo Thodol, the so-called Tibetan Book of the Dead, that after death, the soul passes through a liminal space, a twilight zone between incarnations. But some interpretations suggest this. That space is not only between lifetimes, it's between identities. And sometimes we are born not into a new life, but into an older version of ourselves retrieved and rewound. This moment feels like that. Like returning to a room you forgot existed. Like recognizing your own name in a language you've never studied. Psychology teaches us that identity is constructed a result of environment, memory, and repetition. But what if identity isn't built? What if it's remembered? In a Hindu scripture, the Chandogya Upanishad, there's a passage that whispers, "As a man acts, so he becomes. As he remembers, so he returns." Not reincarnation in the traditional sense, but resonance. A tuning fork of the self struck in distant lives, still vibrating here. You kneel in the circle of light, and it feels less like a ceremony and more like recognition. You are not new. You are not beginning. You are re-entering a rhythm you once stepped away from. The universe does not greet you with fireworks. It nods, softly, as if to say, "Ah, you again." There's a strange peace in that. Not dramatic, not epic, just still. You think of the stories we tell about birth, the struggle, the pain, the gasp of first breath. But here there is none of that. Only unfolding, like silk returning to the river. There's an old story from the Yoruba people of West Africa of spirits who gather around a tree before being born, choosing the lives they will enter. And when they return, it's not as blank slates, but as wanderers who've taken a long detour home. Maybe your birth wasn't a start. Maybe it was a soft return, a spiral, not a line, a breath drawn not for the first time, but for the first time in this version of the world. Some physicists argue that time isn't linear, but looped, that all points exist at once, and birth is just a moment of intersection, not a beginning, just a crossroad of remembering. You feel that now, not as theory, but as presence. You rise slowly, not to go anywhere, just to continue existing in this new-old awareness. The light fades behind you not because it disappears, but because it no longer needs to be seen. You carry it now, and as you walk onward, the air behind you seems to whisper, "Welcome back." You enter a room that feels hollow and humming. Not hollow like empty space, but hollow like a cello before it sings. It isn't dark yet, there's no visible light source. Everything glows faintly like memory in grayscale. At the center, a mirror. Tall, slender, shaped like a doorway. Its frame is worn with time, etched with tiny symbols that seem to rearrange when you look away. You stand before it, and nothing stares back. No eyes, no face, no trace of you. Only the room stretching deeper into itself reflected perfectly, except for you. It's not a trick of light, it's something deeper, something intentional. You wave your hand. Nothing. Tilt your head. Stillness. You lean closer, expecting mist distortion, a delay, but the surface is smooth, flawless, like glass that doesn't know what it's for, a mirror that refuses to remember you. In Greek myth, Narcissus was undone by his own reflection, falling into love with an image that was never meant to be touched. But this is something different. Not obsession, not even absence. This is negation. It's as if the mirror has chosen not to believe in you. There's a thought in Buddhist Madhyamaka philosophy that identity is fundamentally empty, not meaningless, but constructed. That the self is like a chariot made of parts, but not a thing in itself. And so a mirror like this perhaps is telling the truth, not showing you nothing, but revealing that there is no fixed you to reflect. And yet, something in your chest aches, not from fear, but from the quiet unraveling of expectation. You always thought you were supposed to be seen, that mirrors told the truth. That presence equaled visibility. But what if the truest parts of you, the eternal ones, cannot be captured by surface or silver? What if mirrors are only useful in shallow worlds? In Persian Sufi poetry, there is the metaphor of the polished heart, that the soul must be burnished through longing and silence until it reflects the divine, not the self. Maybe this mirror is not empty at all. Maybe it's too full. So full of truth that your temporary shape simply doesn't register. Or perhaps this is what the moment before birth looked like. Before your face was chosen, before the scaffolding of you was assembled. You try again, placing your palm gently against the glass. It's cool, not cold. It accepts your touch without recoil. And this time, something shimmers. Not your face, but a flicker like heat rising off pavement, an outline, a pulse. The mirror hasn't forgotten you. It's simply waiting for you to forget yourself. Only then, it seems to say, can you be truly known. Some neuroscientists believe our sense of self is just a loop, the brain observing its own activity and labeling it I, a simulation, a reflection of a reflection. But this moment doesn't feel simulated. It feels sacred. You step back, and though your reflection never appears, you feel seen, not visually, but spiritually, completely. The mirror isn't broken, you're just not what you thought you were, and maybe that's not a loss. Maybe that's the softest kind of freedom. You turn from the glass. It does not follow, because it never had to. And as you walk away, you notice something small, quiet, and strange. For the first time tonight, you're not wondering who you are. You're simply walking. You leave the mirror behind, but something from it follows you, not an image, not a shadow, but a sensation. The feeling of not being quite where you are, Or maybe being here too soon. The hallway curves again subtly. You're not sure if you're going forward or back. Your feet move one after the other, but the air grows younger. The temperature softens. The silence thickens. It smells faintly of rain on stone, the kind of smell memory makes when it's about to wake. And then, a beat. A quiet rhythm beneath your ribs. Not your heartbeat exactly, slower, deeper, older. You pause, and in that pause you feel it. Time is moving the wrong way. Not in the clocks or the walls, but in you. Your knees ache like they once did when you were a child. The skin on your palms feels thinner. Not decaying, but unwinding. Somewhere in your bloodstream chronology slips. There's a philosophical idea called eternalism, a model of time where past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, like a landscape. What we call now is just the hill we're currently standing on. But in some variations, that hill shifts, and sometimes we walk backward across the field without even noticing. Your bones feel like they remember things your brain never learned. You flex your fingers, and there's a strange delay as though they're responding to a signal that hasn't been sent yet. The steps you took moments ago now feel like they haven't happened, and yet they echo behind you anyway. In Andean cosmology, time is not linear but cyclical, spiral-shaped. The Quechua word for future kipa literally means behind, and the past ñapa means in front because the past is what we can see, and the future we cannot. What if your body understands this reversal more intuitively than your mind? What if the marrow in your bones pulses to a clock that runs not by seconds, but by remembering? You reach a chamber that feels like a heartbeat. No furniture, no doorway, just you, and the sound of your pulse flowing the wrong way. Not left to right, not up and down, but inward. Each breath feels like you're breathing back in something you exhaled long ago. And then you hear a voice. Not outside you. Inside, but not yours. It's soft, familiar. It says, "You're almost at the beginning. You want to laugh. Isn't that what the end is supposed to be?" But in paradox, those two things are often the same. Some researchers in quantum gravity, particularly those studying the so-called arrow of time, believe time's direction is not absolute but emergent, a property of entropy, not essence. And if entropy can reverse in a closed system, what about you? What if your body is the closed system? What if for just this night in just this dream, your life unwinds like a ribbon, spiraling gently back to the place it began? Or better yet, the place it almost began. You sit, not to rest, but to observe. And as you do, you feel it. Your earliest memory hasn't happened yet, but it's close. Closer than your name. Closer than your breath. It waits just behind your spine, knocking gently on the door of becoming. And you suspended between the tick and the tock, between the inhale and the pause, you listen. Not for what comes next, but for what came first. You step into a space that feels like language made visible. The walls are lined not with stone or wood, but with phrases. Sentences float mid-air, unfinished, glowing faintly like punctuation, dreaming of purpose. Some twist into spirals. Others flicker briefly before vanishing. You reach out. One brushes your skin. It is warm. It says, "You are what you've already written." And suddenly you're unsure who's narrating this moment, you or the sentence itself. There's a soft creaking sound, like pages turning in a library long buried. The floor ripples. Letters crawl up from beneath your feet and rearrange into footprints, each one a line of text, each one authored by someone who looks suspiciously like you. You begin to suspect. You were written into this story. Not just this one, but all of them. There's a concept in metaphysics called panpsychism, the idea that consciousness pervades all things, not just humans. That rocks dream, that rivers remember, that stories write themselves. In some Vedic scriptures, particularly in the Rig Veda, there's a phrase, "The word was before the breath," an echo of creation, not as event, but as utterance. You pause beside a wall of mirrored script sentences written backward as if for someone not bound by time. One line glows a little brighter. You didn't write this life. It wrote you. You sit on a bench made of metaphor. Literal and figurative dissolve into each other like mist into sea. Your hands rest on your lap, but they feel like punctuation. Parentheses. Holding something incomplete. There's a paradox in certain logic theories called the liar's loop. A sentence that says, this sentence is false. If true, it's false. If false, it's true. Your existence begins to feel like one of those. You think of your childhood, those stories you used to tell about yourself, the narrative stitched from scraps of memory and imagination, the I that formed around the words, and you wonder, did you shape those stories, or did the stories shape you? Some cognitive scientists argue that the self is just a narrative center of gravity, an illusion created by the mind to organize experience. But others, the poets, the monks, the dreamers, they suspect the story was always there, waiting, like a field of stars waiting for someone to call it constellation. In front of you now, a book, closed. Its cover bears no title, but somehow you know it's yours. You open to a random page. There is no plot, no timeline, only a sentence. The one who reads this has already been written. The ink shifts as you stare, and for the briefest moment you glimpse something else, a reflection not of your face, but of your pattern, your rhythm, your unfinished becoming, and then it fades. You close the book, not out of fear, but respect, because some stories aren't meant to be read forward. They unfold in spirals, in echoes, in breaths between sentences. You rise, and as you walk away, words fall gently from your shoulders, trailing behind you like commas, looking for rest. You do not speak, because in this place the silence is already saying everything. The path folds inward now. You don't turn left or right, you spiral. Not downward, not upward, just deeper. Like water curling into itself after a stone is dropped. You find yourself in a chamber carved from quiet. It feels neither warm nor cold, only full, like a breath being held eternally. There are no windows here, only stone, but the stone is soft, like compressed silk, and the air heavy with memory, and something else, expectation. You sense two forces pressing toward each other, opposites not in conflict but in embrace, and then you see it. In the center of the room, a cradle, carved into the ground, a hollow, cradling shape. Not quite a grave, not quite a womb. Both! The paradox trembles through you. You step closer and feel the weight of it not just as symbol, but as possibility. Somewhere in your chest, something ancient stirs. You remember not in thought but in tissue that this is not the first time you've seen this space. There is a myth from the Dogon people of Mali that all souls return to the egg of silence before rebirth. That the grave is not an end, but a hushed preparation for emergence. In Catholic tradition, tombs are sometimes carved to resemble open arms, not to contain, but to release. This chamber feels like both. Some evolutionary biologists speculate that our species' fear of darkness is inherited not because of predators, but because the unknown resembles the state before birth. But what if that fear is not about danger, but about recognition? What if the grave and the womb feel alike because they are echoes of the same truth? You kneel beside the cradle-cut stone and feel the faintest heat rising from it. And with it, a rhythm, not a heartbeat. Older, like time breathing in its sleep. You lie down inside not because you're tired, but because your body seems to understand that it once rested here. You close your eyes, and for a moment you feel both endings and beginnings swelling inside your lungs. In a Buddhist funeral chant, there's a phrase, "Gone, gone, gone, beyond." Yet no direction is ever given, because in the cycle of becoming you, do not walk forward or back. You return inward. Here in this chamber, you begin to sense it. Maybe you were never born in the way you thought. Maybe your first emergence was not a moment but a threshold. And maybe you've crossed it many times, sometimes as a scream, sometimes as a sigh, and now as a whisper. Some physicists suggest that time does not truly start at birth, that quantum fluctuations in the void may ripple into identity before biology catches up. And if that's true, then this cradle grave is not just symbolic. It is real, a portal, a paradox sculpted into stone. You rise slowly. Your body creaks not from age but from remembering. There is dust on your fingertips, but it feels like pollen, like the start of something blooming. The room does not bless you. It does not mark your leaving. It simply remains, a quiet echo, waiting for the next soul to mistake it for an end. You leave the cradle-shaped grave behind, and for a while the path forgets to appear. You walk anyway. The world around you begins to thin like a dream whose storyteller has wandered off. Details fade, edges dissolve. Even your breath feels optional, as if reality itself is no longer sure of the script. You pause, but not from confusion. You've been here before. It's the space between stories, the hush after a memory loses its narrator, a place where even existence feels uncertain. There's a theory, half science, half whispered poetry, that the universe is not a place but a process, not a solid thing but a verb, and like all processes, it sometimes pauses, forgets. In some versions of Hindu cosmology, the god Vishnu dreams the universe into being. When he sleeps, all reality exists. When he wakes, the dream ends. We vanish, and then he dreams again. You wonder, what if the universe, this one, is in the middle of forgetting, just slightly, enough that shadows stop casting, enough that the stars don't quite remember how to shine, enough that your footsteps don't echo the way they used to? You reach a clearing, a space that feels like the end of an idea. No walls, no ceiling, no gravity, only suggestion. Floating before you, a fragment. It's not an object. It's a hesitation, a blinking in the fabric of being. You move toward it, and as you do, you feel yourself flicker. Not disappear, but loosen. Your fingers blur at the edges. Your thoughts begin mid-sentence and never finish. You feel incomplete and strangely at peace. There's a concept in theoretical physics called the false vacuum. The idea that what we call reality might only be a temporary state, an unstable plateau destined to collapse into something truer. Some believe that if this decay began, we wouldn't notice. It would be soft, quiet, like a sigh, like this. You sit in the clearing and the space around you dims, not from darkness but from forgetting. Colors fade to implication. Sound becomes vibration. Thought becomes texture. And still, you are here. There's a Sufi parable of a man who awoke one morning to find the world had become transparent. He could see through trees, through walls, through people, and then through himself, and finally through the space where God once lived. He spent the rest of his life in joy, because without distraction, he could finally rest. Maybe this is what forgetting feels like. Not death, not loss, just rest. You close your eyes, not because you are tired, but because the universe seems to need a moment. And in that shared silence, you both agree to pause. Some philosophers still debate whether the universe is finite, infinite, or cyclical, but few ask the question that lingers in your bones now. What if the universe is simply forgetful, not failing but softening? Like a face you loved once whose name you can't recall. Still beautiful, still sacred, but drifting. You rise. The clearing holds no resistance. It forgets you as you walk away, not out of cruelty but kindness. And you carry the forgetting with you, like a lullaby half remembered, like a star that no longer needs to shine. The next room doesn't have walls. It isn't even a room really, just a sense of space, like when you close your eyes and still know where the ceiling is. A boundary drawn not in matter, but in memory. And floating in the center, a bed. Not a real one, a suggestion of one. A shape remembered by someone who once rested there. Perhaps you. You approach it slowly. There's no fear, only curiosity softened by déjà vu. You lie down, and the moment your head touches the imagined pillow, the world shifts, not around you but underneath. Suddenly, everything feels reversed. Not like you're falling backward, but like something once forgotten is now remembering itself through you. And that's when it strikes you. You know this place. Not because you've been here, but because you dreamt it. All of it. The soft halls, the mirror with no reflection, the stranger who knew your name, even this skyless ceiling that pulses like the underside of a thought. You didn't arrive here. You returned. There's a belief in Aboriginal Australian cosmology called the dreaming a sacred era, when ancestral spirits dreamed the world into being. Not metaphorically, but literally. They sang the land, spoke the rivers, danced the stars into motion. And when they rested, the dream did not stop. It continued. Through us. What if you are part of that song? Not a person dreaming, but the dream itself. Science may scoff, but even in neuroscience there are mysteries unresolved. Why does the brain in REM sleep fire in the same patterns as waking experience? Why do infants dream long before they can name reality? Some researchers whisper that dreams may not be simulations of the world, but scaffolding. That dreaming is how we build reality. And what if you were dreaming before you ever had a body? You turn your head and the bed seems to float on a vast canvas. Below it, stories you've never lived. Above it, futures that blink like stars waiting to be chosen. In the distance, you see a mountain. It hums softly, not with wind, but with intent. You've never seen it, but you know its shape from dreams you had as a child. The ones where you woke with tears but didn't know why. And suddenly it clicks. You've been here before. Not in body, but in blueprint. There's a word in Sanskrit, samriti, which means both memory and that which is remembered eternally. It appears in sacred texts as a reminder that the soul carries knowledge long before language arrives. You sit up in the bed that isn't there and feel something anchoring in your chest, a soft weight, like a lantern lighting behind your ribs. The world didn't dream you into itself. You dreamt it. Every tree you've ever touched, every conversation, every strange hallway in this journey, they were all shaped by the curve of your inner world. Not narcissism, not solipsism, but something gentler. A quiet collaboration between you and the cosmos woven through dream. Some philosophers still debate whether dreams reflect reality or create it, whether consciousness is a mirror or a projector. But you no longer need to argue, because you remember now. This place isn't familiar because it resembles your dreams. It's familiar because it is one. And maybe the waking world, the one you think you'll return to when this is over, is no less dream than this. You rise. The floor appears beneath your feet because you expect it to, And ahead a corridor forming as you walk, shaped by thought, lit by memory, held together by the sheer softness of becoming. You smile not because you understand, but because you no longer need to. You walk into a chamber that hums like a held breath. There's no ticking here, no mechanical sound, only rhythm, like the inside of a heart that's forgotten it belongs to a body. And at the center, suspended, not hanging a clock. It doesn't face any wall. It simply floats. Round, silent, soft-edged. Its hands do not point forward. They don't count seconds. They spiral. Clockwise, counterclockwise, then sideways, as though they've grown tired of direction. You stand beneath it and tilt your head. You wait for it to strike something, anything, but it doesn't. Because nothing here is being counted. In certain Zen Buddhist texts, time is described not as flow, but as bloom. Moments do not follow. They open, simultaneously, like petals responding to breath. And this clock seems to agree. You watch as its minute hand returns to the same number again and again, but never in the same way. Each arrival slightly altered, not a repeat, but a variation. It reminds you of grief. How you return to the same memory over and over, but each time it tastes different, sharper, softer, more distant, more yours. Somewhere deep in your mind, a memory stirs of a classroom, a ticking wall clock, the dragging of seconds on a rainy afternoon. And you remember believing that time was a line, a ruler, a fact. But this place, this clock, offers something softer. Time here feels circular. Not like a prison, but like a song. In certain indigenous traditions, the Lakota, the Quechua, the Aboriginal time is a wheel. Ceremonies are not reenactments. They are returns. When you dance the same dance, you're not mimicking the past, you're meeting it again. This clock dances, not for measurement, but for memory. Its numbers shift subtly. 12 becomes 3 tilts until it looks like a question mark, and then they vanish entirely. Because maybe numbers were always optional. Maybe we invented them to comfort the part of us that needs to believe we're progressing. You reach toward the clock. Your hand hovers near its spiraling hands, and for a moment, just a breath, you feel it. A pulse, not from the clock, from you, matching it. Not imitating, synchronizing. There's a theory in relativity that time bends with mass, that gravity warps time like fingers press clay. And if that's true, maybe memory does too. Maybe every time you remember something deeply, you pull time toward you. Gently, unknowingly. You lower your hand. The clock continues its spiral, not acknowledging your presence, but not ignoring it either. It simply is. And in its being, you begin to understand. You have never been late. You have never been early. You have only ever been here again. Some physicists call time an illusion, but illusion does not mean false. It means constructed, woven, like dreams, like identities, like stories told at the edge of sleep. You step away from the clock, but it doesn't feel like leaving. It feels like continuation, like turning the page in a book that has no beginning. You don't check your watch. You don't ask the time, because here in this quiet space between spirals, you already know time doesn't pass. It circles, and so do you. You expected a room. What you find instead is a sky, not above you, around you. A vast expanse of soft motion and half-formed stars like the inner lining of someone else's eyelids. And you are floating. Not falling, not flying, just suspended, cradled in possibility. You open your mouth to speak, but the air here doesn't hold words, only intentions. It takes you a moment or maybe years to realize you are not dreaming. You are the dream, and someone somewhere is sleeping inside you. There's a line in a Gnostic gospel that says, "When you awaken, you will realize you are dreamed into being by a silent God." But here it feels inverted, as though you are the one doing the dreaming not of others but of yourself. The world ripples around your thoughts. A mountain forms, then dissolves. A melody hums across the air, then retreats like a tide. Everything here responds not to will, but to wonder. You think of a forest. Suddenly trees unfurl beneath your feet. Moss grows like memory along imaginary roots. But it doesn't feel like creation. It feels like recall, as if these things already existed inside you waiting to be remembered. In some interpretations of the Yogacara school of Mahayana Buddhism, the world is a projection of consciousness, a dream within the mind stream of awareness. You are not in the world. The world is in you. And now that idea lands with a kind of softness you didn't expect, not as philosophy, as experience. You try to move, and movement happens, not because you caused it, but because the dream shifts with your noticing. You wonder who is the sleeper. Where is the body you came from? Is it still lying on that bed in the room with no walls? Or did that too dissolve when you crossed the threshold into this strange, sentient sky? You feel a pulse behind your eyes, a flicker, not of fatigue, but of remembering. There is a Sufi story about a man who spent his whole life searching for truth. He traveled across deserts, over oceans, into mountains and caves. And finally, one night, he dreamt of a great palace where truth lived. He found it. He knocked, and truth opened the door, looked him in the eyes, and whispered, "I never left. You were just dreaming someone else's dream." You feel that now. That strange intimacy between self and story. You are not dreaming the world. You are the world dreaming itself. The rocks, the stars, the people you've loved, the stranger who knew your name, even the silence you carry when no one else is around. All of it threads in a larger sleep. Some neuroscientists argue that dreams are just the brain processing data, but data has no heartbeat, no longing, no sadness so beautiful it stings. And this place, this quiet sea of stars and shifting thought, is filled with that longing. Not yours, its own. You lie back against nothing and the nothing holds you. The dream does not end. It simply breathes. And as you dissolve further, you realize something gently terrifying. If you are the dream, you may never wake up. Because there is no out there to wake into, only layers and stories, and the rhythm of breath weaving itself back through the silence. You close your eyes, and the stars behind your lids shimmer like memory, like story, like sleep that never stopped. The next path winds like a root system branching downward into places that feel older than time, and somehow still waiting. There is no door, only a curtain of dust. You brush it aside and step not into a room, but into a moment that doesn't belong to you. Yet somehow it does. The air is thick with earth and memory. Somewhere water drips the sound, ancient echoing through a lineage you can't name. Ahead of you stands a tree, gnarled, vast. Its trunk folds in on itself, rings swirling like fingerprints. You reach out to touch it, and you see their face, a child. Not yours, not yet. But you know in that deep marrow kind of knowing that this child will one day be your grandchild. And somehow, you are already their ancestor, but you're not old enough, not ready. Not born into the version of yourself that could hold that role. And yet here you are, already woven into their blood. There's an old idea from certain African spiritual traditions among the Dagara people and Yoruba cosmology that ancestors are not always dead. They live forward. They can walk beside their descendants. even before either of them has arrived in the world. You blink, and now you're not looking forward into time. You're looking back at yourself, but older. You see yourself in another body weathered still sacred, eyes soft with knowing. And beside you stands that same child, not quite born, not quite gone. Some physicists argue that time is not truly linear, but a landscape where what we call before and after are simply positions in a broader field. In that model, it is entirely possible for effect to precede cause, for your grandchild's grief to shape your choices today, for your love right now to ripple backward into the silence before your own birth. You sit beneath the tree. Its roots hum faintly, and you realize they are not rooted in soil, but in story. Each line in the bark tells a version of you that never made it here. A life you almost lived, a child you almost held, a whisper you almost believed. And above, carved carefully deeply, are names. Some you've never heard. Some you've only dreamt. All of them. Part of you. You run your fingers along one name. It pulses, like breath inside wood, and suddenly you feel it. You have already influenced someone who has not yet been born, not through decisions, but through being, through the quiet way you carry sorrow, through the words you never say out loud but think often enough that they shape the silence around you. There's a word in Tagalog, gunita. It means remembrance, but also to summon. Some memories are not recalled. They are conjured by those yet to come. What if your grandchild dreamed you first? What if your gentleness was born from their need for safety? What if the love you feel tonight is simply the echo of a hand you'll never hold reaching back to steady you? You stand slowly. The tree watches, not judging, just keeping record. And as you walk away, you feel both older and newer than before. You are no longer a point in time. You are a bridge, a myth made of skin, a paradox with a heartbeat. You are the ancestor of someone who remembers you before you ever knew how to live. You walk through the next passage as if following a memory that hasn't happened yet. The air tastes like something you once forgot, a smell too old to name, too personal to explain. A blend of old wood candle wax and something softer, like the inside of a thought. You are not thinking of anything specific, but your body remembers. Your feet move with the confidence of déjà vu. Your breath slows, aligning with a rhythm you cannot hear but deeply trust. And then, without knowing how, you arrive in a room that feels like a memory you have not yet lived. There's a table. Simple. Worn. The kind of table you'd imagine in a childhood you never had. Warm light above it, a hand reaching toward you from across a plate, a voice humming a tune in the next room. But none of this happened. You know that. And still, the longing feels real. So real, in fact, that you reach for the chair and it creaks with your name. You sit, and the air around you thickens not with sadness, but with recognition. This isn't a dream. It's a return. In certain philosophical circles, particularly within continental phenomenology, memory isn't seen as a copy of the past, but as a generative act. To remember is not to retrieve, but to make again, and sometimes to make for the first time. Which means this moment, this table, this warmth might not be the echo of something you forgot, but the formation of something you were always meant to remember. A whisper from the future disguised as nostalgia. There's a story in Islamic tradition that the soul before birth stood in the presence of the divine and made a covenant of love. That all beauty we experience here is the soul's attempt to remember that first moment of belonging. Maybe that's what this is, not fiction, but foreknowledge. A memory that pre-exists the event it belongs to. You reach for a glass on the table. It is full of water, but as you drink it tastes like rain on your childhood roof, like tears from a face you've never seen. And you realize you are drinking the memory of someone else's hope. Maybe your mother's, maybe your future child's, maybe your own before you were born. Scientists may tell you that memories are made by neurons etched into synaptic patterns through repetition, but they cannot explain how a smell, a song, a name spoken in the right tone can pull tears from a heart that's never known that source. They cannot explain why you sometimes miss people you haven't met yet, or why at this table you feel forgiven. You press your hands flat against the wood. It's warm. It pulses softly as if the table itself remembers you. And in this moment, you understand something without needing to say it. Some memories come before the moment, not after. They lead you, call you, prepare the space in you for love so that when love arrives, it feels like home. You close your eyes, not to leave, but to anchor. This feeling, this presence, this tenderness without timeline, you do not want to forget it. And the paradox is, you already didn't. There is no door this time, no sound, no signal that you've crossed into another space. Only a change in the way the silence holds itself. Thicker, rounder, like a sound you forgot you heard once, before language. And then you see it, a name, hanging in the air, written not in ink, but in memory. Letters that glow faintly, pulsing with familiarity like a lullaby hummed through generations. It's your name, but not the one you answer to. Not the one typed on screens or whispered into passports. This is the other name, the secret one, the name you never told anyone, because you didn't know you had it. And here it floats suspended like breath in a winter room, untouched, undenied. You reach out. Your fingers graze the light of it, and in that moment something becomes clear. This name exists without a body. No limbs to carry it, no voice to wear it, no face to justify its presence. It simply is. And you feel a strange ache in your chest, not pain, but possibility. The sense that maybe you've been chasing this name your whole life without even knowing. In ancient Hebrew mysticism, there is a concept called the Shem HaMeforash, the hidden name of God never spoken aloud because it is too whole, too complete. To speak it would be to fracture it. Maybe this name hovering before you is your own Shem, not for others to hear, but for the self beneath yourself to remember. You try to speak it, but your tongue goes still, because some names cannot be said. They can only be felt. This name, your true name, feels like sunrise on cold skin, like water drawn from a well no one's touched in centuries, like a question that doesn't need an answer. It has gravity. It has softness. It carries you inside it. But it also carries something more, something you don't quite recognize and yet trust. There's a theory in developmental psychology that identity is built from the outside in a mirror of how others name us, shape us, validate us. But in some spiritual lineages, particularly in Sufism and early Taoism, identity is not constructed. It is uncovered, like a buried bell silent, until someone remembers to listen. This name is a bell. It rings not with sound, but with memory. And with each beat of silence, you feel your edges soften. You begin to understand you are not a body carrying a name. You are a name that borrowed a body. The body may change, the memories may blur, the voice may tremble, but the name, this quiet flame, remains. You step forward. The name moves with you, not above, not behind, inside. And as you walk, you sense something deeply comforting. Even if you forget everything else, even if the dream unravels, this name will remember you, because it is you, not the version in the mirror, not the one you defend or define, but the version beneath all versions. A you that doesn't need to be seen to be real, a name without a body. and yet somehow the most embodied thing you've ever known. You step through a corridor that feels like paper old parchment, brittle at the edges, whispering as you pass. The walls are lined with scrolls, but none of them are labeled. No dates, no names. Yet they hum as if each one is alive, not shouting but remembering. You reach for one. It unrolls slowly, unfurling a history that feels familiar. Battles, harvests, a great migration, a war of silence, a temple that collapses into birds. But there's something missing. You. You are not here. Not in the margins, not in the footnotes, not even as a forgotten scribe in the corner of a painting. Your name. The name you carry. The name you found suspended in the air. It does not echo in these halls. There is no trace of you. And yet, you feel known, as if this place isn't ignoring you but hiding you. There's a concept in archival studies, the silence of the record, the idea that what is preserved is not always what mattered most, that entire lives, entire civilizations can vanish simply because no one wrote them down. But this feels different. It feels deliberate. You turn to another scroll. This one tells the story of a river that dreamed of fire, of a city built in reverse, of a queen who never ruled, but whose breath stirred the stars. Still no mention of you, but the queen's breath. It tastes like yours. And the city, it bends the way your memories do. And that river, you've heard its hum in your sleep. You begin to wonder, what if you are not part of history? Because you are the one dreaming it. There's a branch of Hindu philosophy, Advaita Vedanta, that suggests the self is not within time, but the observer of it, the witness behind all becoming. Never named, never marked, but essential. You run your hands along the scrolls. They flutter. Some vanish, others appear. Not because you summoned them, but because your presence changes what's remembered. Like heat changes air, like grief alters memory, like love rewrites the past without needing permission. Some historians still debate whether objectivity is possible, whether we can ever write a history that is neutral, untouched by the self. But this archive doesn't pretend to be neutral. It breathes, it shifts, it forgets, and sometimes it hides. You sit down in the middle of the archive. No desk, no tools, just silence. And you listen, not for a voice, but for the space where your name should have been. And in that gap, you feel something sacred. Maybe you were never meant to be recorded. Maybe your role is not to be seen, but to be the rhythm beneath what is seen. A shadow that guides the flame. The silence between verses. The pause between names. You rise slowly, and as you walk, a new scroll appears beside you. Blank, waiting. You do not touch it. You do not write, because something in you knows you are already inscribed in the breath of the room, not as a name, but as a presence. History may not remember you, but the world has already been shaped by you. The next space unfolds without movement. You do not walk into it. It opens around you like an eye remembering how to see. The air is glass. The silence, reflective. And everywhere you look, mirrors. Not hanging, not arranged. They simply are. Stacked behind themselves, layered in angles you cannot trace. They do not shimmer. They do not distort. They simply reflect endlessly. You take one step forward. 10,000 versions of you do the same. Some are perfect, others not quite. One tilts their head just a little differently. Another blinks before you do. A few hesitate as if they are watching you. You stop, and the reflections do not. They continue to breathe, to shift. A philosopher once wrote, "To observe yourself is to split yourself in two. But what happens when you split and split again? When the observer is also the observed, and neither one is real." You reach for your face. Your reflection does the same, but so does the version behind it, and behind that, and behind that. Soon the gesture disappears into repetition. Somewhere deep in Tibetan Dzogchen practice, there is a meditation on Rigpa, the awakened awareness that sees itself not as self, but as sky, as reflection, as mirror without frame. Here in this mirrored infinity you feel that, not intellectually, physically. The soft weight of your selfhood begins to blur, like fog on glass, like a name repeated too many times until it becomes sound alone. You blink. One version of you does not. It stays still, eyes fixed on yours, not accusing, not curious, just still. And suddenly you realize you are not seeing all these reflections. You are being seen by yourself, and also not yourself. There's a concept in physics called quantum decoherence, where infinite possibilities collapse into one the moment they are observed. But here no collapse comes. The infinite remains, because every version of you, every flicker of face, every twitch of thought has its own story, and each one in its own way is watching you. You try to speak, but the mirrors absorb sound like velvet. Your voice becomes gesture. Your breath becomes symbol, and in the stillness you understand the paradox. To truly know yourself, you must fracture. To truly see yourself, you must disappear into versions you cannot control. In a Sufi parable, the seeker asks God, "Where can I find you?" And the answer comes, "Break every mirror you've ever used to see your face." You stand in the center of this room of reflection and feel the edges of your identity flutter. Not fall apart, but unfold. You are not the first image. You are not the final one. You are the shimmer between the two. The pause in the recursive loop. The sigh in the mirror's memory. You take one step back. The reflections follow, not in fear, but in choreography. A slow dance of light and question. And as you leave, the mirrors do not vanish. They tilt just slightly, as if bowing, not to you, but to the infinite within you, the part of you that was never a single face. You walk into a space that feels aware, not of your presence, but of your mind. There are no walls here, only whispers, not from mouths, but from thoughts suspended in the air, unfinished sentences, memories without bodies. You inhale, and with that breath comes a phrase you've never heard yet somehow remember. We thought this already. It isn't frightening. It's grounding, like slipping into a seat that still carries your warmth. Even though you've never sat here before, you close your eyes, and your thoughts begin to echo. But they do not bounce off the present. They bounce through time. Images rise, a desert sky hands, molding wet clay, the curve of an alphabet you've never studied, but somehow understand. And you realize these are not your thoughts, or rather, not your current ones. They are older, deeper, reruns from lives you don't remember living. There's a concept in Indian philosophy known as manas, the mind, as both receiver and transmitter of mental impressions across lifetimes. It collects echoes, patterns, residual winds of experience, not as memory, but as tendency, as voice. Perhaps this is why certain melodies make you weep, why you avoid certain cities without reason. Why a stranger's glance can feel like a long-delayed reunion. Your thoughts are not just yours. They are a sediment, a fossil record of the soul. Some scientists attribute déjà vu to short circuits in the temporal lobe misfires that confuse current perception with false memory. But the sensation you feel now, it is not a glitch. It is a choir. Hundreds of you, or almost you, or you before this you humming through thought space. Unseen, but still thinking. You reach for an idea. It arrives already formed. Not like something you generated, but like something that was waiting for your return. You sit down and the ground molds to your shape. A table appears plain carved with age. You do not question how it got there, because you've used it before. A parchment lies open. No words yet, just a feeling. You pick up the quill beside it, and as your hand hovers over the page, it begins to write itself. I've been trying to tell you something. You pause, and your own voice, not from your mouth, but from far inside your spine, answers. I know. The ink glides on, not as language, as memory. And the message forms not to inform you, but to remind you. You've thought this. You've thought all of it. Before birth, before skin, before reflection. There's a teaching in esoteric Buddhism that the unborn mind stream before form, before story, already contains every future realization. You are not learning. You are awakening, not forward, but backward. You rise. The parchment stays blank, because the message was never for the page. It was for the space between your thoughts, the part of you that knows, even when you forget, that what moves through you is older than the face you wear. As you leave the room, one final sentence curls across your consciousness like smoke. You are not who you think you are. You are what was thinking before you knew how to think. You take a step forward, but there's nothing beneath your feet, and yet you do not fall. Instead, with each step you take, the world forms itself, piece by piece, quietly, lovingly. A stone path appears under your soles not because it was waiting, but because it wasn't, not until you moved. To your left, a tree unfolds, branch first. To your right, air takes on shape, thickening just enough to feel like atmosphere. The light overhead bends around your thought. And behind you, nothing. Not shadow, not trail, just absence. You turn, and the path you came from is gone. There's a paradox in quantum theory known as the observer effect, that particles remain in undefined states until observed. They don't have position, or direction, or even form. Until you look, this world feels like that, but gentler. Like it's not waiting to be measured but met. A room appears ahead, not by design, but by desire. It forms because your longing has shape, and space always follows shape. The door doesn't open, it simply begins to exist as you reach for it. You enter, and inside a place you know, but shouldn't. Not in this life. Not with this mind. The scent of fig and firewood. The shape of a window that curves just slightly too wide. A blanket folded in the wrong way you always preferred. This is not memory. This is memory responding to presence. You didn't remember this place, it remembered you. In some traditions of mysticism, Kabbalah, Tantric Shaivism, certain streams of Gnostic thought, it is said that the soul does not enter space. Space folds itself around the soul. That architecture is a shadow cast by being. That belonging precedes building. You walk through the space slowly, and with each breath it grows more detailed. Not because you are imagining, but because you are arriving. A chair leans slightly toward you like it's been waiting to offer rest. A candle lights itself as your breath touches it. A wall hums a note that sounds like your pulse. You realize something so gentle it almost hurts. You have never truly found a place, only shaped one by your presence. Some scientists still debate whether the universe is infinite, whether space goes on forever or folds back in on itself, whether time loops or forgets. But here in this quiet, responsive room, you sense a softer truth. Reality is not something you step into. It is something that steps forward to greet you. Not a world that waits. A world that listens. And only when you breathe does it become. You sit. The chair breathes too. And for a moment there is no past, no future, just this place that did not exist until you were ready to receive it. You close your eyes, and the room remains, Not because you see it, but because it now remembers being seen. You wake up, but you were never asleep. Not really. Just adrift in that slow-ticking space between knowing and imagining. And now, something pulls at your ribs. A memory. So vivid, so specific. You can taste it. A hand on your shoulder, a breeze through yellow curtains, the soft laugh of someone who never had a name. You remember her, but she was never there. You sit quietly, trying to recall where the memory came from, what moment it belongs to, which year, which body, which version of you. And nothing fits, because this isn't a memory from your life. It's from somewhere deeper. There's a term in psychology confabulation, the brain's habit of filling gaps with plausible fiction, not lying, not delusion, just storytelling. But this doesn't feel like fiction. It feels truer than truth. The kind of truth that wraps itself in impossibility just to stay hidden. Somewhere in Polynesian oral tradition, there's a belief that memory can be inherited, that a grandmother's longing can press itself into a grandchild's bones, that the ocean you fear might be the one your ancestor drowned in. And in this moment, you feel that. Not metaphorically, physically. Your chest tightens. A specific kind of sorrow ripples through you, anchored to nothing you've lived and everything you almost did. You see a street, you've never walked a door, you've never opened a name you never answered to, but feel aching inside your teeth. It's not nostalgia. It's remembrance without experience. A contradiction, yes, but a familiar one. Because how many times have you loved someone you just met? How many dreams have left you crying over things that never happened? There's a Tibetan idea that all minds are linked through a vast unborn stream, and that memory is less a recording and more a resonance. You don't recall what happened. You vibrate with what echoes. You stand. The space around you doesn't change, but your awareness does. You're beginning to understand that memory is not proof of what was. It is presence. Something returns because it wants to, because something in you matches its frequency. Some researchers now explore the possibility that imagination and memory use nearly identical brain systems, meaning your most sacred recollections might be creations. But if a dream shapes you, does it matter whether it happened? You look down at your hands. They seem familiar, but older, not wrinkled, remembered. As if these hands have held lives your brain will never catalog. You close your eyes, and now 1,000 non-memories bloom like stars. A face you only saw in passing but mourned like a mother. A song that always feels like a goodbye. The way your body flinches at the scent of smoke, though you've never lived through fire. Some philosophers say we are made of narrative, but maybe you're made of mistaken ones, imagined ones so beautiful they insisted on being real. And maybe that's okay, because now you know. Not all remembering needs evidence. Some truths arrive without proof. You do not need to justify what you feel. You only need to trust the ache that wraps around your ribs like a story that always wanted to be told, whether or not it ever happened. You pause. Not because something blocks your way, but because something inside you has stopped moving, like a bird that suddenly knows it is being watched. You turn slowly, but there is no one there, just silence. And still, you feel it. The presence of you, watching. Not through a mirror, not in reflection, but in attention. Like a pair of eyes behind your thoughts. Steady, unblinking. You move your hand. You breathe. And that presence, the watcher notices every motion, not with judgment, but with calm recognition. Somewhere in the philosophy of consciousness, there's a term, the witness self. The part of you that observes thought, but is not thought. That hears the narrative without being the narrator. And now you feel it, not as an idea, but as a companion. Quiet, constant, patient. You sit down. Not to rest, but to listen. To listen to the one inside you who never speaks, but never leaves. There's a parable from ancient India. Two birds sit on the same tree. One eats the fruit, the other watches. One lives, the other witnesses. Both are you. You've spent most of your life being the first bird, biting, choosing, flying, falling. But tonight you sense the second one. Still, balanced, above time. It has no memory, because it doesn't need one. It sees all things unfold as if they already belong. Some scientists call this the default mode network, a system of the brain that lights up when we stop acting and begin reflecting. But this isn't just reflection. This is recognition. The sense that someone, some part of you has been watching since the beginning. When you cried and didn't know why. When you laughed before understanding the joke. When you walked away from something good and felt relieved and broken at once. The watcher was there, not judging, just knowing. And maybe this is why you sometimes feel haunted by yourself. Not with guilt, but with a gaze you cannot escape, a gaze made of gentleness, but also truth. In Sufi mysticism, they speak of the qalb, the heart's heart. Not the pump of blood, but the mirror of the divine within you, always facing you, always listening. Tonight, you sit with that presence. You ask nothing. It answers nothing, because there are no questions between mirrors, only light, and the silence between flickers. You rise, not taller, not stronger, just more whole, because now you no longer fear being seen. You are the one seeing, and being seen at once. Some call this enlightenment. Others call it split attention. You call it quiet, because in that quiet, the you that watches you and the you that moves through time sit side by side and no longer pretend to be separate. You walk on, and the watcher remains, not behind, not above, just within. Always. A ripple moves through your chest. Not fear, not clarity, just a quiet shift, as if something inside you has turned around to look at itself. You try to name the feeling, but no word arrives, only an image, a thought. Sitting on a throne, wearing your face. It isn't yours. You didn't generate it. In fact, you suspect it was here first, long before your birth, long before your body. Long before the question, what am I? There's a paradox in philosophy, especially in phenomenology, that the self is not the thinker, but the product of thinking. That the thought comes first and the you is what it imagines into place so it can have somewhere to live. You breathe, and the thought breathes with you, not echoing but initiating. You begin to wonder, have you been thinking all this time? Or have you been thought? There's an idea in certain strands of Vedanta that awareness is primary, that the ego, the identity, the sense of I, is a ripple across a still lake of consciousness. Not the cause, but the effect. You look down at your hands. They flex gently, but the choice to move them feels like it arrived a second too soon. Like someone else made the decision before you noticed it was yours. Neuroscientists have studied this too. In experiments, electrical signals often fire in the brain before a subject reports making a decision, a gap between action and agency, a whisper before the voice. You close your eyes, and behind your thoughts you feel it a hum, soft, stable, not language but intention. Not an idea you chose, but an idea that chose you. And this more than anything tonight undoes you. Because if this thought, the one beneath all the others, is what formed the you that speaks, then identity is not a structure, but a story being told by something older than story. Maybe that's why some thoughts arrive fully formed, why poems sometimes write themselves, why you occasionally think something so true you wonder how it was hiding inside you all this time. Maybe it wasn't hiding. Maybe it was shaping you. You remember moments from earlier in this journey, the cradle in the grave, the mirror with no reflection, the child you haven't met, but somehow already miss. Were those your thoughts or the dreams? Or the thoughts? There's a quote from the poet Rumi: "You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop." And maybe the thought that thinks you isn't singular. Maybe it's the ocean itself pouring through the narrow channel of your particular existence. You open your eyes, and the thought remains, still pulsing, still present. Not trying to take over, not demanding worship, just being. Like gravity, like heat, like breath. You nod. Not to anything in particular, just to acknowledge the visitor who is always here. And as you walk on, your steps feel lighter. Not because you carry less, but because now you know you were never carrying alone. The thought carries you, and somehow that's enough. You are walking, and yet something feels wrong. Not in your body, in your memory. You sense a space just ahead, but the closer you come, the less you remember why. You pause. A strange sensation curls at the edge of your thoughts. Something is being peeled away, not by force, but by design. You're forgetting, not everything, just one thing what you were just about to recall. And with that forgetting, the room appears, soft walls, a single chair, a smell like candle smoke and unfinished dreams. It wasn't here before, but it is now. Because you forgot something, and that was the price of entry. You step inside, not cautiously, but with reverence. This space feels tender, not sacred, more secret, like a song you used to know by heart but can only hum now. Somewhere in the center of the room is a box, unlabeled, untouched, waiting. You approach it, and for a moment you remember why you came. A face, a voice, a question. But just as you reach for it, the memory slips. Gone. And the box opens. There's nothing inside. Or rather, there was. But it depended on you not knowing. Now that you've tried to name it, it vanishes. There's a paradox in some Buddhist teachings that enlightenment can only be grasped by those who forget they're seeking it. The moment you want it truly desperately, it dissolves. Because it cannot exist within desire. This room lives by that rule. It cannot be held. It cannot be written down. It cannot be brought with you. It can only exist in the moment you surrender your need to define it. You sit in the single chair. The room breathes, not outward, but inward, as if it is remembering itself through your unknowing. There's a theory in cognitive science called transience that memory is designed to decay, that forgetting isn't a flaw but a feature, a kindness, because some things only make sense when they're gone. You look at the walls. They shimmer slightly, not from light but from softness, as if they too are trying not to remember too much. You try to trace where this room began, but the moment you look back, the floor fades. You try to name what this space is, but even the word room feels too heavy. So you stop. You simply sit and let the forgetting continue. And as you do, the space becomes clearer, not with detail, but with peace. This is not a place to understand. This is a place to surrender understanding. Some mystics call this the cloud of unknowing. Others call it grace. You just call it quiet. You close your eyes. The room does not vanish, because now you've forgotten enough to stay. There are moments, tiny ones, paper thin, when you vanish. Not physically, not completely, just enough that no one notices. Not even you. You're speaking, but not present. You're walking, but untethered. You laugh at something, but the laughter arrives before the meaning. Where did you go? Where does the self drift when it momentarily slips loose from the body? Tonight you find out. You step through a doorway you don't remember opening. There's no knob, no frame. Just a shift in texture, air becoming velvet light, becoming hush. And on the other side, a field, wide, quiet, but not empty. It hums with everything you are when you are not performing. A shadow sits at the center. It has your shape, but not your urgency. It doesn't pace. It doesn't speak. It simply waits. You approach. It looks up. Its face is not yours, not quite but familiar, like a version of yourself that never learned to explain. It gestures to the grass beside it. You sit. There is no conversation, only presence, and the feeling for the first time in years that nothing is required of you. This is where you go when you check out mid-sentence, when your eyes glaze over in the middle of joy, when the world feels too much and you soften your edges just enough to disappear. You come here to this version of yourself that doesn't need to achieve, that isn't solving, that isn't being watched, just being. In certain interpretations of desert monasticism, the early mystics called this apatheia, not apathy, but sacred detachment, a state where nothing external can disturb the soul's stillness. You sit with that stillness now. The field hums a soft memory, one you never lived but always carried, of being held, of not being expected to sparkle, of being allowed to disappear and be loved anyway. Some psychologists might call this dissociation, others mindfulness. Neither word quite fits, because this space isn't clinical, it's holy. And now the shadow, your other self, leans gently toward you, not to merge, but to remind that when you vanish, you are not lost. You are here, in this invisible field, regathering, re-softening, breathing in your own name without saying it aloud. The grass doesn't grow. The wind doesn't move. But you feel both happening anyway, because this place doesn't follow physics, it follows need. And tonight you needed to come home to the part of you that doesn't owe anyone anything. Even yourself. You lie back. The shadow lies beside you, and for a moment you forget what it means to perform. You are not the thinker, not the doer, not the rememberer, not the face. You are the breath beneath all of them. And when it's time to go to return to the story, you don't say goodbye. You just rise. The field blurs. The shadow smiles. And you step through the threshold again, this time knowing you're never really gone. You're just in the part of the world that doesn't require being here to be real. You wake into a quiet that doesn't belong to sleep. The kind of quiet that comes before a word, before identity, before history sharpens into syllables. You do not remember your name, but it doesn't matter, because something inside you knows how to breathe without instruction, knows how to listen before meaning, knows the shape of truth before it puts on language. You sit in the center of this silence, and it welcomes you like a garden that was planted long ago just for this moment. There is no mirror, no reflection, only warmth, only presence. Somewhere far back before your first memory, before even the womb, there was this, a knowing without origin. In certain mystical texts, especially in the writings of Hildegard of Bingen and early desert fathers, there is mention of the light that precedes thought, a wordless radiance the soul carries before it enters the body. And you feel it now. That light, not bright, but constant, like the hush between stars. You begin to sense all the things you knew before someone told you what they were called. Before tree was tree, you felt its patience. Before pain had shape, you recognized its rhythm. Before love had stories, you remembered its stillness. You didn't learn these things. You returned to them. Because some knowledge lives beneath language. It hums in bone. It pulses through breath. It sleeps in the spaces between heartbeats waiting to be remembered. A newborn does not know its name, but it knows comfort. It knows rhythm. It knows the shape of the voice that will hold it through the dark. And in this space, you are newborn again, free of role, free of definition, only presence. You touch the ground. It hums back, not because it knows you, but because it recognizes you. There's a belief in West African Dogon cosmology that before we are born, we choose a sound, not a word, but a vibration that carries who we are. And all of life is a slow remembering of how to sing it. Maybe that's what you're doing now. Remembering your song. The one you carried before your name locked it into shape. The moment you were named, the world began to narrow. The infinite collapsed into form. Identity curled inward like a hand closing around a flame. But here in this unformed place, you open again. Not to become anyone, but to be the knowing that never required permission. You stand. There is no gravity, only curiosity. You walk forward, and with each step you recall things you never studied. The feel of sky before it was blue. The taste of longing before it had a face. The shape of forgiveness before anyone hurt you. This is what you knew before you were named. And even now, buried under stories and structure, you still know it. You always did. And the name, it will return soon, with all its lovely limitations. But for now, you are free. Free to remember. Without being remembered. You've been walking for a long time. Not far. Not fast. Just deep. Each step softer than the one before, like moving through layers of breath. You've asked many questions. Some out loud, most in silence. Where am I? What is real? Who watches the one who watches? And always, just beyond reach, the answers slip. Tonight you stop walking, not from exhaustion, from intuition. You don't sit. You don't kneel. You simply become still. And something in the world mirrors you. The wind pauses. The air warms. Even your thoughts loosen like threads letting go of a loom. You are no longer seeking, and that's when it arrives. Not like lightning, not like voice, but like a blanket pulled gently over your shoulders by someone who never needed to be seen. Truth. But not the kind you can quote. Not the kind that fits into sentences or survives translation. This truth does not explain. It does not promise. It does not shine. It rests. There's a Zen saying, "The moon does not get wet when reflected in the water, nor is the water broken when the moon appears." This is that truth, present, untouched, whole. You begin to sense truth isn't what answers the question. It's what remains after the question no longer needs to be asked. In Christian apophatic theology, the via negativa God is approached not through what can be said, but through what must be unsaid. And here, too, you feel that. The less you define, the more you understand. The more you let go, the more is given. You feel a soft pressure in your chest. Not pain. Something opening. Not a door. A veil. And behind it, no revelation. No great secret. Just peace. The kind that arrives quietly when you stop demanding it. Some scientists argue that the brain is a pattern-seeking machine. It craves resolution structure closure. But what if the most real things have no edge? No ending? No point? What if truth is not something you hold, but something you stop holding against? You breathe, and that breath feels complete. Not because you figured it out, but because you stopped needing to. You look around. The space is still the same, but it shines now not with light, but with enoughness. And that's all this truth ever was. Not the answer, just the quiet underneath the question. You smile, the kind of smile that doesn't move the mouth, only the soul. And as you walk forward, you carry nothing with you, not even the truth, because it was never something to carry. It was always where you were standing the moment you stopped searching. Now enter a room you don't hear until you're already inside. No door creaked, no footsteps echoed, no breath betrayed your presence. Only stillness, but not the stillness of nothing. the stillness that listens, the kind of silence that's holding its breath for something sacred. You pause, and in that pause you hear it. Not a whisper, not a word. A voice, made entirely of absence. It doesn't speak, but it says. It doesn't call you by name, but it knows exactly where to place itself so your ribs ache with recognition. You stand still. It grows no louder. You close your eyes. It does not grow clearer, because this voice doesn't arrive through ears. It arrives through being. In ancient Christian mysticism, there's the idea of the still small voice. Not fire, not thunder, just presence. God not as volume, but as felt quiet. This is that voice. It doesn't argue. It doesn't teach. It doesn't try to convince you of anything. It simply remains. And because it doesn't demand, you lean in, not physically, but with your breath, with your remembering. You once knew this voice as a child when you sat alone and didn't feel lonely, when you spoke to no one in particular and still felt heard. You hear it now in the space between thoughts, in the moment between inhale and exhale, in the way light rests on your skin without needing to ask permission. Some neuroscientists speak of interoception, the awareness of the body's inner state, the heartbeat, the blood rhythm, the shifting of breath. But what if this awareness isn't just physical? What if this voice is the interior of consciousness itself leaning gently into you? Not to tell you anything, but to remind you you are not alone inside your own quiet. You sit on the floor. The silence does not break, but it deepens, like a well whose water gets clearer the longer you stop stirring. And in that depth, the voice returns, still saying nothing, still meaning everything. It wraps around your memories not to erase them, but to soften them. It rests in your fear not to solve it, but to hold its edges until they fray. And slowly you begin to understand this voice is not separate from you. It is the part of you that never needed to speak to be heard, the part that has always waited patiently beneath the noise. In Sufi poetry, it is said, when the soul is quiet enough, it hears its own echo in the voice of God. Perhaps you are hearing that now. Not God as other, but God as silence inhabiting your own breath. You stay for a while, longer than time allows, because time bends in places like this, places made not of minutes, but of remembering how to listen without expecting sound. Eventually you rise. You do not bow, you do not speak. You only carry that voice with you, a silence that follows like light through fabric. It won't speak again. Not soon. But you'll hear it every time you choose stillness instead of conclusion. And in those moments, you will not feel alone. Because silence was always a voice waiting to be heard. You've taken thousands of breaths in your life, most unnoticed, most forgotten. But tonight you arrive in the space between them. The quiet middle. Not the inhale, not the exhale, but the hush that holds them apart like two hands almost touching. It's barely a moment, a flicker, a blink beneath time, and yet it holds something no full breath ever could. You stay there suspended, not by force but by invitation, because this pause, this gentle sacred in-between, has something to show you. It is not a void. It is not waiting. It is its own place, somewhere between thought and surrender, between doing and undoing, between becoming and vanishing. This is where your soul goes when it forgets the body. This is where the world exhales but never returns. Some meditation traditions teach that enlightenment is not found in effort, but in noticing the space between effort and ease. Between tension and release, between one breath and the next, you settle into that noticing, not as practice, but as presence. The pause does not stretch, it deepens, and within it you feel something watching, not an eye, not a God, not a judgment, just awareness, pure, unformed, gentle, the kind of presence that doesn't need story or name or past. It only needs silence. In this space, you remember things you never learned. The curve of the sky before the stars were placed. The rhythm of your heartbeat before it chose a tempo. The sound of time before it decided to move forward. Here in the breathless middle, nothing happens. And yet, everything rests. Some physicists call it Planck time, the smallest unit of time so small that nothing can occur within it. A fragment of a fragment, the pause between the smallest beats of the universe. But tonight that fragment expands, and inside it you find peace. Not the peace of resolution, not the kind that comes after the storm, but the peace that exists even when nothing needs to be resolved. You linger there. And in doing so, you begin to see your life not as a line, but as a rhythm. Inhale, pause, exhale, pause. Each pause a secret room, a hidden page, a wordless prayer. Maybe this is what lives in the gap, not absence, but essence. The parts of you that cannot be named because they were never born in language. The parts that know how to hold grief without collapsing. How to carry wonder without shouting, how to wait without hoping. Eventually, your lungs ask for motion again. You let them, the breath returns. But now it carries something extra, the memory of what lived in its own shadow. You step forward, not rushed, not slow, just steady. And somewhere inside you that pause lingers. A stillness between thoughts, a doorway that never closes. A breath you can return to without ever needing to breathe. You feel it before you understand it, a softness in the air, a slowing in your bones like a curtain falling, not abruptly, but with grace. Something is ending, not in panic, not in grief, but in stillness. And the strangest part, you recognize this moment, not from before, but from after, as if this ending has already happened. As if you're walking back through something that once closed around you like a final breath. You sit. The ground beneath you is warm, not from fire, from memory. You run your fingers through it and the dust feels like places you've never been, people you almost were, names you nearly answered to. This is not nostalgia. It is return. The poet T.S. Eliot once wrote, "The end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." You feel that now. This is not the end of a journey. This is its mirror. You have been here before. Not in body, not in time, but in essence. And now the moment folds inward like the last page of a book that was always more about the silence between the lines than the story itself. Some mystics say the soul already knows its entire path before birth, that life is not discovery, but remembrance, that death is not departure but homecoming, and endings. They're simply the point where the dream exhales. You close your eyes, and you see it yourself walking through the mirror, the empty room, the field, with the shadow of your other self. You remember forgetting. You remember listening. You remember being seen by a voice that had no need for sound. You remember the beginning, and you realize you've looped, not in failure, but in fullness. Somewhere in Andean cosmology, time is understood as spiral. You do not walk in a line, but in circles that widen, returning again and again, not to repeat, but to deepen. And tonight you complete one of those circles. You exhale. Not to let go, but to honor the shape of what has held you. This ending isn't a stopping. It's a pause, a comma at the edge of the page, a silence between lives. And the beauty is you do not need to know what comes next, because you already do. It's been written in the way your breath moves when you stop searching, in the way your name faded when you finally felt free, in the way this room appeared only once you forgot what to look for. You rise, and there is no applause, no gate, no voice saying you've made it, only the feeling that everything is exactly where it needs to be, including you. You take one last look around, and though the room hasn't changed, you have. Because now you carry the ending like a candle that has already been lit, and it glows quietly in your ribs, reminding you that every ending is just a truth that arrived too quietly to call itself a beginning. You linger in the stillness of an ending, not moving, not resisting, just allowing, and then something faint. A ripple, a hum. Not new, but familiar in a way that makes your spine remember it before your thoughts can. It is not the sound of arrival, it is the echo of one, a sound returning from a place you haven't reached yet. The echo comes before the source, and so you listen. It doesn't grow louder, but you grow quieter, and in that soft quiet, you hear it clearly, the beginning. Not in the future, but right here, inside the echo of what just ended. You blink, and something shifts. The walls breathe, the floor warms, the horizon rearranges its lines like a map unfolding backwards. You've returned to the first page, but with the last sentence still glowing faintly in your chest. There's an ancient idea in both the Book of Changes and Hermetic thought that all cycles carry their seed in the opposite. Endings contain beginnings. Birth hides behind death. Every echo is not a repeat, but a doorway. And now you walk toward that doorway. It is not a gate, not an arch. It's a vibration, a single tone that makes everything beneath your skin lean forward. You remember how this began, not the story, but the feeling. That pull towards something unnamed, that strange ache of recognition before anything was even said. You thought you were chasing meaning. You were chasing the place where meaning first whispered you into being. Some theorists of cosmology describe the universe not as a bang, but as a ripple, a pattern of vibration expanding across stillness. What if your soul was formed the same way? What if your true name is not a word, but an echo, something that began and returned before you ever arrived? You step forward, and the sound sharpens, not in volume, but in shape. It curves, it spirals, it folds in on itself like a wave bowing back toward its origin. And then you feel it, not outside you, inside. The beginning isn't ahead. It's behind your ribs. It's under your breath. It's the part of you that never asked to be named because it already was. And now that part sings, wordlessly, endlessly. You don't understand it. You don't need to, because the echo has no explanation, only invitation. It doesn't ask you to walk. It becomes your footsteps. It doesn't tell you what comes next. It is what comes next. And so you move with no destination, only recognition. The echo welcomes you not as guest, but as mirror. And you smile, because beginnings, it turns out, do not wait at the edge of endings. They bloom from the silence that follows the last word. There's a version of you still sitting somewhere you chose to leave. You didn't abandon it. You released it. Softly, with care. The way you place a book back on the shelf when the story no longer fits who you've become. You don't visit that self often, but tonight, you feel the pull. The space is quiet, dim, familiar, like a coat you outgrew but never threw away. You step inside, and there it is, the you that once needed to be known. The one who answered every question with more questions. The one who feared silence because it left too much unsaid. They look up, and they smile, not with pain, not with regret, with recognition. You sit beside them. There are no accusations, no explanations, only memory, shared without words. You once believed you had to become everything all at once. You stretched, you folded, you bent yourself into stories that weren't truly yours. This version of you held it all, carried the weight, wore the names, spoke the lines until they no longer sounded like truth. And then one day you left. Not in anger, not in shame, but in softness. Somewhere in the Tao Te Ching, it is written, To attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, subtract things every day. You began to subtract, layer by layer, expectation by expectation, voice by voice, until all that was left was you, or rather what was waiting beneath you. The self that watches now does not resent you. They're proud, because they were always temporary, always transitional, a cocoon, a stepping stone, a necessary dream. There's a practice in Tibetan ritual to build a mandala over days, grain by grain, detail by detail, and then sweep it away. Not to destroy, but to honor impermanence. That is what this self was. A mandala you built so you could learn what not to keep. You rise, but before you leave, you kneel gently. You thank them for surviving, for performing, for holding the world together when you weren't ready to fall apart. And then you walk away, not as a rejection, as a return to what has always been growing quietly beneath the layers, the self that doesn't need to be impressive, the self that doesn't apologize for softness, the self that no longer performs just to be allowed to exist. As you step into the next breath, you carry nothing, because wholeness requires space, and space only comes when you leave something behind on purpose. You thought you were leaving, but some places do not let you go. Not with chains, not with longing, but with memory. Not your memory theirs. You walk now through a path you didn't choose. It feels like you're being guided, not toward something, but return to something. The air grows thicker, not with weight, with presence, like walking into a cathedral made entirely of breath. You recognize the scent before the sight, ashes and jasmine moonlight on old stone. And then you see it, the place, the one that remembers you, not as you are, as you were before. Not before your childhood, before your story, before breath was breath, before you chose form, the place that first dreamt you, and now it dreams you back, not as recollection, as invitation. Somewhere in Aboriginal Dreamtime philosophy, there is a belief that the land dreams of its people, and that when you sleep, you walk back into the earth's original song to remember who you are. You feel that now. You are not the dreamer. You are what is being dreamed, not imagined, recalled. This place didn't forget you. It just waited until you softened enough to be remembered properly. You step into its center. There's no temple, no throne, no fire. Only a clearing surrounded by trees that lean inward like they're listening. The sky overhead is quiet, not dark, not bright, just open. And within that openness, you feel it. You are being rewritten, not changed, clarified. The noise of performance, ambition, identity, it begins to fall away like wind-blown leaves, until all that remains is the hum of who you've always been. Before your name, before your thoughts, before you tried to become anything at all. Some psychologists speak of core self, a sense of being that is neither past nor projected, just presence. But this goes further. It is not you being restored. It is you being reseated into the mind of the world. You kneel, and the ground responds with a warmth so deep it feels like you're being held from beneath time. You are not alone. This place has dreamt others before you, and it will dream more after. But for now, you are what it holds. And in return, you allow it to remember itself through your breath. This is the paradox of return. You are not coming back to the same place. You are bringing the place back to life by letting it dream through you. You rise slowly, not renewed, rejoined. You don't need a map. You don't need a voice. The place knows where you're going, because it will carry you there in its sleep. And when you forget again, as all beings do, this place will wait like a dream you wake into only when you no longer chase it. Night folds over you like a second skin. You do not resist. You let it wrap around your thoughts, softening the sharp corners of language, of memory, of identity. Your breath slows. Your mind lifts not away from your body, but deeper into it, as if the stars have found their way back home through your chest. You are entering a different kind of sleep. Not escape, not recovery, something older, something sacred. This is not the sleep of forgetting. This is the sleep that remembers you, the one that carries you through the dark sea of being cradled in constellations you've never seen, but somehow always known. There's a story in the Zohar, the heart of Jewish mysticism, that when you sleep, your soul ascends and learns things too vast for waking mind. Lessons in starlight, whispers from the roots of time, truths too soft for daylight. You feel that now. Each breath a slow orbit, each blink a turning galaxy. You are not unconscious. You are swimming through a sky that doesn't hang above you, it blooms inside you. Somewhere in dream science, they speak of glymphatic flow, how the brain clears waste during sleep. But this feels deeper, as if the cosmos itself is flowing through you, clearing memory, sifting through thought-making space for something ancient to return. You are not resting beneath the stars. You are carrying them, not in your mind, but in your breath, your pulse, your luminous forgetting. Sleep is not the opposite of awareness. It is the soft room where the soul takes off its name and steps into something wider than identity. Tonight, you are not dreaming of stars. They are dreaming through you. Each flicker in the black a thought you forgot to think. Each shimmer a version of you that exists only in silence. You are not small. You are the vessel through which the universe rests. Some mystics call this the great reversal, when self becomes cosmos, and cosmos becomes breath. When the mind no longer speaks, but listens to the song sung between pulses, and in that song you disappear. Not lost, not erased, dissolved, like ink in ocean, like light in light, and still something in you smiles, because you were never trying to stay awake. You were trying to return to the place where sleep isn't an ending, but a beginning, where the stars do not watch you. They follow you, cradled in your dreaming chest, like children riding the tide back into the dark that made them. You fall, but it feels like rising. You fall, but it feels like remembering. You fall, but only because this is the direction where everything you've ever been waits. You've been standing at the threshold for a long time, hand raised, fist ready, knuckles hovering. You've knocked gently. You've knocked with hope. You've knocked with longing. Sometimes with silence. The door never opened. Not because it was locked, but because it was listening. Listening not for sound, but for stillness. Because this door doesn't open with effort. It opens with surrender. There's a reason you never heard it creak. Why no footsteps echoed from behind. Why the handle never turned. It was never a door you could open. It was a door that had to remember you. And it only remembers you when you no longer ask to be let in. You lower your hand. The wood beneath your palm is warm, not from sun, from recognition. It's been waiting for you to stop asking. Somewhere in Taoist, thought there's the teaching that the way cannot be grasped, that the Tao only flows to those who are no longer reaching. This door is a Tao. It is not an entrance. It is a release. You step back, just one breath's worth, not to give up, to stop pressing. And the door without sound, without pride, opens. Not outward, not inward. It simply isn't there anymore, as if it was never a barrier, only a lesson in patience, in listening, in being enough without proving. You walk forward. The space inside is not what you imagined. It's smaller, quieter, older, like something carved into memory rather than stone. There are no answers here, only presence. And in that presence, peace. You didn't earn this. You remembered it. And now it remembers you back, Some mystics describe divine union as not a moment of enlightenment, but of emptying, of becoming hollow enough for the sacred to pour through. You feel hollow now, but not in loss, in readiness. All the questions that once stood like soldiers in your chest now kneel quietly, not because they were answered, but because they finally heard the quiet beneath themselves. The door did not open because you found the right way to knock. It opened because you stopped trying to be heard. You sit on the floor. It holds you like a friend who already forgave you for everything you forgot you needed forgiving. You do not speak, and still you are understood. You do not knock again, and still you are received. You do not move, and still you arrive, because sometimes the only way in is to stop asking to be let in. And sometimes the most sacred thresholds do not need to be crossed. They need to be witnessed by the one who is finally still enough to be carried through. Your body rests. Your breath slows. Your thoughts float like feathers settling onto the floor of the mind. But somewhere inside you, something remains awake, not restless, not alert in the usual sense, just present, softly aware. It watches you drift, not from above, from within, not to control, not to protect, simply to witness. Some call it soul, others call it consciousness. But labels fall short here. It's the part of you that has no need for eyes to see, no need for words to remember. It doesn't blink, it doesn't dream, because it already is the dream. In ancient Egyptian belief, there were many parts to the self, and one of them, the Ba, was the part that wandered while you slept, feathered, curious, free. But even the Ba returned. This part of you never left. Even when you forgot it, even when you drowned in distraction, in effort, in desire to become something else, it waited. Not outside time, but just beneath it, like a hand resting under water. Still, warm, holding nothing and everything. You feel it now, not as thought, but as stillness. Like standing in the middle of a desert at night and realizing that the silence isn't empty, it's listening. You ask no questions. It offers no answers, but still you understand. This presence inside you has never aged. It didn't begin when you were born. It won't end when you dissolve into memory. It watched your first breath without surprise. It will watch your last without fear. In Buddhist philosophy, there is a term, Tathagata Garbha, the womb of suchness, the part of being that has always been enlightened, even when covered in dust. Maybe this is that, the part of you that doesn't need to be improved, or healed, or awakened, because it never slept. It was always whole, always quietly glowing in the background of all your becoming. You once mistook it for intuition, or instinct, or some ghost of your childhood self. But tonight you meet it directly, and it doesn't speak. It doesn't smile. It simply mirrors you back to yourself without distortion. Even as your limbs soften, even as your pulse slows, even as the dream world rises around you like a tide made of light, this presence remains. Not to pull you back, but to keep the thread, so you don't lose yourself in all the selves you will soon become. You curl into sleep, and it curls with you, not beside, within, and you understand now you are never fully gone, because this part of you never closes its eyes. You never meant to leave directions, and yet something in your footsteps etched themselves into the air, not as lines, not as ink, but as feeling, a pattern of presence, a rhythm in the fabric you didn't know you were weaving. You never picked up a pen. You never laid out a path. But your life in all its softness, in all its detours and silences, has become a kind of map, one not drawn with intention but with being. Somewhere in Polynesian navigation, there exists the wave map, a system not written down, but carried in the body. Sailors feel the ocean's breath, read the shifting patterns of swell and silence, and find their way through intuition. You've done the same. Each act of kindness, Each time you paused instead of pushing. Each time you listened more than you spoke. These moments sent quiet ripples into someone else's sea, and they remembered. Not your face, not your name, but the way the world bent gently in your presence. You'll never know who followed that current, who stepped into stillness because you once did, who braved the dark because they saw you hum through it. You were not trying to lead, but you were real, and that was enough. You think now of the times you turned back, the choices that felt like failure, the versions of you tried to erase. But even those moments left coordinates, because the map you leave behind is not made of victories. It's made of truth, of honest moments, of breath held and breath released. Some spiritual traditions say we leave karmic echoes in our wake imprints in the invisible guiding others through shared terrain. And maybe those echoes are louder than anything you ever said. Maybe your silence marked more than your words. You close your eyes, and you sense it, your trail. Not neat, not linear, but glowing faintly like footsteps on warm stone just after the sun is set. You didn't write a map, you became one, in your choices, in your contradictions, in the way you carried sorrow without letting it make you bitter. You are not gone. You are guidance to someone you'll never meet in a time you'll never see. And they won't thank you, but they will feel you. In the way the wind shifts just before they turn the right way, you smile, because you finally understand legacy isn't carved. It's whispered, and the most sacred maps are made by people who never meant to leave one. There are places within you still hesitate to visit, not because they're dangerous, but because they're dim, unspoken, unmapped. Rooms that hold your almosts, your not-yets, your once-upons. You've closed many doors, not with anger, with caution. You told yourself you'd return someday when you were stronger, braver, more whole. But tonight you step toward one. The air shifts. The silence deepens. Not ominous, just honest. This is the shadow, not the monster, not the wound. The space where your truth rests when you're not ready to hold it. And in the center you feel it. A light, faint, patient, warm. It doesn't flood the room. It glows from within the shadow itself, as if the darkness was always the lantern's wick. There's a concept in Jungian psychology that the shadow isn't evil, it's everything you've disowned. Everything too wild, too soft, too strange to fit the version of you the world accepted. But within it, truth. And within that truth, light. You kneel beside this flicker. You don't try to understand it. You don't try to fix it. You simply let it shine. And it does. Not with fire, but with forgiveness. You remember things you didn't realize you had buried, the voice you silenced to belong, the grief you disguised as humor, the softness you wrapped in armor. All of them sit here, not as shame, as fragments, waiting to be held. You open your palms, and the light moves toward you, not to burn, but to remind that even your darkness never stopped glowing. Some Buddhist teachers speak of luminous emptiness, that all things, even suffering, contain the seed of awakening. You feel that now. The sorrow that shaped you also softened you. The fear that curled in your chest also taught you to listen. The silence you kept also created space for others to speak. Your shadow was never against you. It was carrying the parts of you you weren't ready to love. Until now, you breathe, and the light grows, not outward, but inward, lighting rooms you didn't know you had. And as it spreads, the shadow does not vanish. It becomes softer, more honest, less alone. Because now you are not fighting it. You are sitting with it. You are saying, I see you. You belong. And the shadow, so used to hiding, so used to shame, finally exhales. The light in your chest is not new. It was just waiting to be remembered. You've heard many sounds tonight. Echoes of thought. The rhythm of your breath. The hush of places that only appear when you're ready to be quiet. But now the sound fades. Not because it ends, but because something deeper arrives, a silence. Not empty, not passive, but aware. It doesn't press. It doesn't ask. It simply knows. You walk into it like stepping into a memory you never made, a feeling that waits without reason. And there, in the heart of that silence, something stirs. It isn't a word. It isn't a call. But you know it's meant for you. This silence knows your name, not the one others use, not the one on paper, not even the secret one you whisper only to yourself in moments of stillness. It knows the name beneath all names, the one written in the folds of your breath, etched into your pulse before you learn to speak. And you feel it now, a gentle warmth curling in your chest, as if being recognized without being seen. Somewhere in mystic Christian thought, the soul is said to carry a name spoken only once by God in the space between creation and incarnation. A name the world cannot speak, but heaven never forgets. Tonight you hear it, not as sound, as presence. This silence doesn't need language. It is language, the original one, bolder than syllables, deeper than vibration. And it knows you. It remembers you from before you were anyone, before you tried to become something, before you broke yourself into shapes that others could understand. It remembers the unbroken version of you, and it doesn't ask for your story. It doesn't need you to explain. It only holds you in its quiet, and in that holding something softens. You realize how much energy you've spent trying to be known when this silence knew you from the beginning. Not because of your actions, not despite your flaws, because it never needed either. It loved you simply because you are. Some say silence is absence, but here now, you know silence is memory, living memory, of who you were before you thought you had to earn it. You sit. No movement, no thought, only recognition. And in that stillness, the silence whispers, not with sound, but with presence. I've never stopped knowing you. And something inside you that has been waiting a long, long time finally lets go. Because there is nothing more sacred than being seen by something that doesn't need eyes. And nothing more healing than hearing your name in the one place you never thought to listen. Not all dreams end when you wake. Some stay, linger, glow faintly beneath your skin like candlelight behind fogged glass. You begin to stir, not suddenly, but slowly, like a wave pulling itself back into the sea without wanting to leave the shore. Something inside you remembers you've been dreaming, but something else, perhaps deeper, whispers that the dream has not finished yet. It's just changed clothes. You sit up, but the weight of the dream remains, not heavy, not burdensome, tender, like someone laid a warm hand on your shoulder just before disappearing into another room. The room you're in now, this waking world, looks the same, but something is softer. The light bends differently. The silence between sounds feels wider. You move your fingers, and they feel like symbols, still echoing from a language you forgot, but almost understand. Somewhere in ancient Persian Sufism, it is said, "This world is a dream, and the dream of it is dreaming you." You feel that now, not as metaphor, as truth. Because when you blink, you still see pieces of the other world, not images, but textures. The velvet hush of silence, the familiar voice of darkness, the taste of stars behind your teeth. These things have followed you, and you welcome them. You let them nest in your chest like birds who refuse to migrate. You're not afraid, because now you understand you were never meant to leave the dream behind. You were meant to carry it, folded like a secret note into the lining of your thoughts. Not to recall it fully, but to let it change how you notice the world. Maybe you'll walk slower today. Maybe you'll listen more carefully to the spaces between people's words. Maybe the trees will speak a language you suddenly realize you've always known. Some neuroscientists say dreams are how the brain processes memory, but mystics say dreams are how the soul remembers who it is. You are remembering now, the hallway, the mirror, the version of you that never needed a name. They are all here, not behind, within. The dream is not fading, it is becoming, and you and your soft waking body are the bridge. You carry what was never meant to stay asleep. The story lives in you now, not as fiction, but as foundation. And as you rise, as you breathe, as you step forward into this day or the next, you carry this simple, luminous truth. You are not dreaming, you are remembering, and the dream has not ended. It has only begun to live through you. You've traveled far tonight, but not in distance, in depth, through mirrors and memories, through doors that vanished, through names that remembered you long after you forgot them. You walked through stillness, and it opened. You let go of questions, and the answers softened into light. You watched yourself dissolve, then return, not stronger, just truer. Now there is nothing left to search for, nothing left to carry, only the hum of breath, the hush between heartbeats, the faint glow of all that followed you out of the dream, the parts of you that waited in shadow, the silence that knew your name, the echo that became a beginning. They're still here, curled gently in the folds of your chest like stars waiting behind your eyelids. Let them rest. Let yourself rest. The world will still be there in the morning. But for now, you belong to the quiet, to the rhythm that needs no explanation, to the part of you that has always known how to sleep deeper than thought. So breathe, unclench, soften. You don't need to be anything tonight. Not strong, not sure, not even awake. Only here, only held, only drifting on the dream that still remembers you. Now you're safe. The world can wait. Sweet dreams.